session is Beyond Power, in which the panel would discuss energy efficiency and harnessing renewable heat. The discussion would cover available technologies, challenges, policy initiatives, and much more. I'll quickly introduce the panel. We have with us today Mr. Rahul Dasari, Managing Director, Berkeley Energy Commercial Industrial Solutions, Mr. Siddharth Malik, Managing Director, Megawatt Solutions, Mr. Sunil Kumar, Head of Engineering, KIMS Hospital, Mr. Jatin Pandya, General Manager, Apollo Group, Ahmedabad, Mr. Kishore Venugopal, Senior Manager, Technical Operations, Smart Joules. Mr. Vinay Rustagi, Managing Director, Digital India, would set the context and moderate this discussion. Please send us your questions on the subject in the chat box. We'll try to answer them towards the end of the discussion. Over to you, Vinay.
Thank you, Ankita, and a very warm welcome again to all the delegates, as well as to our panelists for taking the time out for this session. So the subject here is basically renewable heat and other alternative solutions as against plain vanilla rooftop solar and open access renewables. And I think this is a very, very interesting subject. This is a subject that most of us know very little about. The reason being, I think, the rooftop solar and open access power are kind of much more mature sectors. They are much more commoditized. All of us, I would say pretty much all of us understand that. Whereas the more interesting part in terms of renewable heat, energy efficiency, process heat, etc., is beginning to kind of be understood only now. It's becoming more relevant now, and is coming into the discussions, becoming more reliable discussions now. Now, the thing is, if I have got my data correct, most industrial users consume anything between 30 to 50% of their total energy requirements through non-power sources. So that is essentially in the form of direct fuel for various heating, cooling, and other process purposes. And now, as companies are basically looking to not only reduce their cost, but also decarbonize, this part of the whole energy consumption value chain is going to become increasingly more critical. While there are not too many technologies or companies catering to this market, the good thing is that that itself throws up many interesting opportunities. And here we have three very capable companies who understand this space very, very well. So that is PECIS, Rahul Dasari, Megawatt Solutions, Siddharth Malik.
Sure. Thank you, Vinay. A very good afternoon to all my co-panelists. And as Vinay said, I'm also part of the solar bandwagon, in India. Been in the solar and wind sector for now almost 11, 12 years. And I think the biggest learning has been for me as a professional, as an entrepreneur, and from a company is that when we talk about energy is not only about electricity. Not many people realize that, more than 35-40% of energy which needs to be decarbonized is also produced also required by the customer in the form of heating or cooling. And that also gets produced by stuff like furnace oil, coal, natural gas, etc. Right? So, the way I would like to answer your question, Vinay, is first coming from the market or the customer side. That what we saw and what we are trying to do. I think there are. Though it's a cliche, but I think it's making sense more and more. Globally, the ecosystem is talking about the concept of 3 Ds. The first is distributed energy systems, which also is basically called democratization of
energy.
The other is digitalization. That is, as compared to last decade versus this decade, the way IoT, digital twinning, SaaS in the energy tech space has expanded, has been unprecedented. And we're just at the beginning because the AI, ML algorithms for predictive maintenance, etc., has not yet come. Many of the companies like our investors, Siemens, are working on that. And the third element is to decarbonize. That is, what we've seen in the last 2 to 3 years is most of the responsible large corporates, definitely, the likes of, my co-panelists, Apollo, KIMS, etc., they all are now pledging on scientific goals about how they would go about decarbonizing not only their scope 1, scope 2 emissions, but also make interventions in reducing scope 3 emissions, which nobody was talking about till now. And as we see, it's just a matter of time that the carbon markets globally and India also kind of pick up. So these are the three major trends that we are seeing. Now, when we look from a market or from a customer perspective, commercial and industrial customers, what we see is their main requirement, is are these three. Number one, they want to transition to a low carbon, kind of an economy. So whether you call sustainable energy solution, decarbonize, etc. So that's something it's not good to do. It's now mainstream. Number two, in this process, they also would like to have energy cost saving, because for most of the C&I customer, energy is one of their top costs after maybe raw material. And number three, they are looking for decentralized solutions so that also the grid or their energy or power systems becomes more robust, technically more resilient technically, and also they are able to lock in their energy prices for a long term and try and de-risk themselves from the fluctuating coal, diesel, fossil fuel based pricing, that kind of comes in. And all this is now happening, or we can bring to table under the OPEX model, or what we call the build, own, operate, where the technical risk the customer need not take, right? So that technical risk, developers like us can take. And what we're trying to do, Vinay, is that when we look at a customer, a factory, or a hospital, these are the problem statements, and I believe that the problem statement cannot just be solved by doing rooftop solar or more of open access solar, etc., because you'll stop at 60-70%, right? And there is a significant portion of energy that's being consumed by cooling and heating that you're not able to address beyond a point. And then you have the issue of how do you give round the clock renewables, right? Or round the clock solar, because even today solar and storage has not become commercially viable, though technically it is. Right. So from that also concentrating on thermal becomes important. Now, thermal and electricity is on the generation side. Another big element that, we are focusing on is on the energy efficiency side, because if you're able to bring in technology to optimize major processes, major equipment like HVAC, chiller, cooling tower, etc., and you're able to reduce the electricity consumption of these equipment from a baseline, say by 20-30%, then again, you are able to create a savings around which you can create, a model where you share the savings with the customer, and you as an investor also recoup, your investment. So this concept of energy as a solution, both on the generation side and demand side, is something coming in. It's very topical. It has taken in a big way in North America and in Europe, which are the more mature energy markets. And we believe that the same transition is going to happen in India and Asia, because all said and done, the processes, the way the factories operate here are much more, I'll say, unregulated with respect to pollution and emission as compared to what we have in the developed world. Yeah.
So Rahul, so just very plainly, what I've understood is that you basically retrofit the other energy consuming equipment to make sure that the ultimate power costs to the consumers come down. And do you then shift this equipment from fossil fuels to renewable sources like solar, thermal, etc.?
Absolutely, Vinay. So let me give you two examples, one on the demand side and one on the generation side. You will see that many of the dairy companies, pharmaceutical, food processing company require a lot of steam. They need processed steam, hot water, etc. And most of the places it is either produced by coal. You have coal-fired bio, you have a biomass briquette fired boilers, or you have natural gas or furnace oil fuel boilers. So what we are doing is we are going and talking to the companies and saying that we will replace your boiler. We'll replace your boiler with a biomass fuel boiler or a multi-fuel boiler, and we will also take up the responsibility of managing the entire supply chain of the biomass, so that the steam or hot water that is getting generated for your process is absolutely green and sustainable. These, you can kind of certify this biomass. And it also solves an interesting problem in India, like especially in North India. We all are aware, last 4-5 years, around Diwali time, you have the, stubble and the crop burning. So if you're able to solve this issue, it not only kind of creates a source in the rural, a source of income in the rural economy, but it also gives sustainable heat, and the byproducts like ash, etc., can again be circulated back as fertilizer or back to silica industry, etc. So you can build a circular economy around it. So this is an example on the generation side. Similarly, on the demand side, when I say if you look at an old HVAC system or a chiller system or a cooling system, right? Many times you don't need to replace the entire system. It's either the pump or the insulation or some VFD which are malfunctioning, and maybe it's not digitized enough. So a combination of core expertise, domain expertise, followed by retrofitting it with the right kind of sensors, equipment replacement, etc., and then right very precise monitoring is what we will be able to deliver the same kind of TRH of cooling or tonnage of cooling, but the consumption will almost be 20-30% lower.
Very interesting. Thanks, Rahul. Siddharth, we'll come over to you. So we'll start with, what is your main product offering and what are the solutions and technologies you're working on. But I also want to ask two more follow-on questions. One is, what is the scope for electrification of industrial energy consumption, which comes from other forms of energy? I vaguely remember reading somewhere that in India, the share of electricity in corporate energy consumption is actually much lower than it is in the developed world. And of course, as we turn towards clean energy, higher electrification itself can be a faster way to decarbonize. That was one. And second thing I wanted to ask you was, we have ourselves looked at the entire C&I power market and seen, which consumer segments are consuming how much power, how much can of it be replaced under the current constraints in terms of policy, banking constraints, technology, etc. And we have estimated that the total scope for renewable power in the C&I world is about 130 gigawatts, and that is by 2030. That is assuming there are no policy challenges. Similarly, is there any way to size the process energy market in terms by quantum of energy consumption or savings or anything else? I don't know if you have done or if you're aware of any such study in the market. Siddharth.
Sure, Vinay. Loaded question there. The good thing about Prelude, speaking after Rahul, there's less to be said about the industry, right? So that's good. Thank you, Rahul, for setting the stage. Yes, there has been a lot of focus on renewable energy. And of course, energy, the word energy, we've been taught the wrong physics all along. It constitutes power and non-power, right? It constitutes mechanical energy. It constitutes kinetic, whole host of things. That the word energy compasses. But the good news is, the lower hanging fruit, as you and I were just discussing before the session, the lower hanging fruit has been power, electrons. And for the same simple reason that most industries have never really paid for the capital investment for the infrastructure for power, right? It's a state electricity board or a distribution company. So for them to simply change their supplier or augment their supplier with another OPEX company coming in with better, cleaner electrons was a seamless transition. That being said, I think it's more prevalent than ever before because people are recognizing that there's only so much one can do by replacing electron with the green electron, right? And that's good. Nothing to take away from that. That's the need of the hour. But what you do for a bitumen industry, for instance, where 85% energy consumption, not 40, not 50, is heat. Because guess what? That damn bitumen doesn't move if you don't heat it. It doesn't move in pipes, it doesn't move in tankers, it doesn't get loaded, unloaded, so on and so forth. So there are industries like that where heat constitutes more than 80% of the energy, forget power. And of course, we have the other extreme as well of the process industry. So there is this Gaussian curve, and the middle of that curve constitutes most process energy industries, FMCG, biotech, pharma, so on and so forth. If you look at most publications by IRENA, IEA, the Energy Outlook 2020, 2021, including augmented by a recent McKinsey study by MGI, you will realize the numbers are very interesting. And the numbers are more than 200 gigawatt thermal. If you just look at India as a very, very small portion of a much larger picture, right?
Yeah.
That's just non-power demand of energy. So imagine with more than 200 gigawatt thermal equivalent, and I use the word gigawatt because most people will be surprised that that's a unit of power. That's not true. Kilowatt, megawatt, joules, I mean, they're all interchangeable, right?
Yeah.
So pick your favorite, kilocalories, megajoules, whatever you want. But 200 gigawatt thermal is the sheer non-power demand of our nation that is constituted more than 90% by fossil fuel today. So no wonder it has more than 35% impact in terms of GHG emissions, let alone India, even globally. Of course, there are marginal improvements. Is gas better than coal? Yes. But does the GHG footprint of gas suddenly replace your GHG footprint of coal? Not at all, right? So yes, there are interspersed fuel comparisons one can make. Coal better than this, fuel oil better than that, diesel better than this. But the key takeaway is all of these put together are fossil fuels, right? And there are two parts of this entire decarbonization story. One is the energy efficiency and one is on the supply side. So absolutely, as Rahul rightly mentioned, without the energy efficiency bit, I mean, you're just losing whatever good you're doing, right? You're always losing a bit of that. So that's the first kind of plug that needs to be put in place, right? Get those better chillers, get that better insulation, get rid of the old boilers, do things better so that you're not losing, or negawatts. I mean, they say the cheapest energy is the one that you never consumed, right? But what interesting technological developments are bringing forward, such as things like solar thermal, concentrated solar thermal being simply for hot water, but now we have very large, high temperature versions of these systems as well, the ones that we've been installing for industries, including as I have cement plants as well. They have a major role to play. Of course, they're on-site, so they're largely limited by space constraints. But then waste heat recovery, another energy efficiency metric, which can tremendously make a huge impact in steel cement industries, very large carbon footprint industries, right? And of course, then there is electrification of industrial heat. Now, as RE is every electron by sheer probability is going to be more than 60% green in the main grid, new interesting opportunities are opening up in terms of how you can utilize that to kind of drive more greening of non-power applications, right? I mean, similar to transport. We have seen greening of transport. So to summarize, there's a lot going on in this space. There are a lot of interesting new technology developments. We have ourselves launched a very dedicated platform for thermal energy storage that we are bringing to the Indian market now. And I think that is going to be, a fundamental breakthrough, because it allows you to store anytime, anywhere RE for greening your non-power applications, be it heating, be it cooling, be it so on and so forth. And that's something we're very excited about. So to summarize, yes, lots going on. The numbers differ, but I think anywhere about 200 gigawatt thermal of non-power applications in India alone is a very, very conservative number.
So I'm slightly perplexed by that number. 200 gigawatt, you're saying, is the corporate energy consumption coming from outside power. The total corporate power consumption is only about 80 gigawatt hours, 80 to 90, 85 gigawatt hours. So you're saying this is more than 2.5 times that.
Well, point in case, right? The most of the energy consists of thermal energy, actually, right? Pick up any automotive plant. Yes, there is power. But when you really do the math, sit down with their CFO and say, you know what, how much are you spending on electricity and how much are you spending on this? And that's where the difference is, Vinay. The economical value of electricity may be more than the economical value of heat, hence this disparity. But in terms of GHG emission footprint, it's the latter. It is the low value energy, which is the heat, which actually has a huge impact. So yes, it's more than almost 3 to 4 times of their power consumption in terms of volume.
Wow, that's very interesting. And could you be more specific about what are the exact solutions and offerings that you are offering in the market?
Sure. Yeah, I didn't touch upon that. So we are a kind of very interestingly kind of product position company in this space, because we developed the technology, we engineered the solution, we have our own manufacturing facilities, and we have turnkey project execution and operation capabilities for anything to do with non-power applications, right? So we have concentrated solar thermal technologies, we have waste heat recovery, we have thermal energy storage. We bring along a variety of different kind of bought out solutions such as heat pumps as well. And those are integrated into this larger set of technologies that I mentioned. Because remember, there is no silver bullet here. What may work for pharma may or may not work for, let's say, automotive, given their temperature profiles and so on and so forth. So those are the kind of things that we do. So we have worked across, literally any industry that you may think of, be it metals, mining, paper, pulp, where we have augmented and in certain cases even displaced fossil fuel-based boilers. We have one of the largest intervention in the dairy industry in this country. We're one of the first ones to do intervention for effluent treatment plants. Imagine ETP and sludge and wastewater evaporation is a huge menace. It may or may not have economical value, but it certainly does have a lot of nuisance value. That's where we have gotten renewable energy integrated into ETP and wastewater treatment plants for the first time in this country.
Very interesting. Thanks for that.
Sure.
Kishore, can you hear us? Yes, hi Kishore. Kishore,
Yeah.
we wanted to, I don't know if you can take the mask off because it will help us in.
I'm sorry, I'm in a hospital, so
Okay.
I'm at the site, and most of our clients are in hospital, so it's better
Okay.
that I keep on the mask.
Okay, all right. Let's try it this way. So we would love to hear from you. Your company, Smart Joules. What is your business focus, and
Right.
what is your offering to your clients?
Right. So I'll start with this. Basically, I think you all know what's an ESCO, Energy Services Company. We are one of the ESCOs in India and leading ESCOs, we would say.
Okay.
So we started in around 2014, and we had continuing our businesses. There are three business models that we work on mostly, which will come to later. So now, I'll just tell what's the relevance of our work. We mostly work on energy efficiency aspects, right?
Okay.
So we identify a client, and we try to improve their energy efficiency in all the aspects. It's not only one aspect or HVAC or anything that we see, but the predominant focus goes invariably on HVAC because the large chunk of energy consumption goes into that. For say, for example, commercial buildings or hospitals, so like that. So coming back to the three business models that we work on. So one is what we call pay as you save, right? So it's something like we pitch into a client, we carry out some preliminary audits and see what's the possibility there, and what can be offered to the client. And based on that, we come and have the plans ready and offer them something like, see, we will save this much of energy for you, and we guarantee this much of energy savings. So you once we are able to achieve that, you just need to share a part of that savings for this much term, right? So for that, we will be investing on a lot on infrastructure. Like we may be totally revamping the chiller plants. We may be installing new boilers, for example, heat pumps or other things which are basically efficient itself. So we carry out that, and basis that whatever savings we get, we share that. Okay, and our philosophy is we compare the bill to bill. So we take a baseline year and we compare it, and whatever the delta is, with some normalization, of course, and with whatever the adjustments, what we call. So considering that whatever is the savings, we share those savings for a certain number of years. Right? So that is why we call it pay as you say. We call it Joule Pays. So this is a very attractive scheme in which the client doesn't invest anything. Basically, they invest nothing, and there's a contractual term, and after that term, we give all the things for free. So that has been our key focus till now. And
what are the kind of sectors that you have worked in so far?
This has been mostly into the hospitals and the commercial buildings.
Okay.
And recently, we have also got into foundries and other industries. We are trying to pitch into other industries.
Right.
So the most attractive thing is in the scheme is that what prevents energy savings or energy conservation from happening. People are not ready to invest by themselves because they are not sure whether they will save something, or they are not having the requisite funding. So here the capital investment is totally not required, and they just need to pay out from their OPEX, which is already reduced.
Understood.
So that's the most
Understood.
thing.
Thanks,
And the
Kishore.
next part is,
Sorry. Yeah.
there are three business models. So I'll just continue into the next. So the next part is what we call Joule Cool, in which, as somebody had already mentioned, we know that cooling is measured in terms of TRH. It's something that we measure cooling, the rate of cooling. So we charge any prospect client with respect to the cooling that they consume. Okay, so it can be a new building also. It can be an existing building where we do split profit, and they need probably some more additional cooling. So what we do is we carry out an extensive audit. We agree, come into an agreement with the client that, see, this is what the cost that you're incurring, and as of now for per tonnage of cooling, and we will provide the service at this much rupees per ton.
So again, the service is basically energy efficiency when you reduce the energy consumption.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, this is also coming into energy. So basically, in energy efficiency in three different aspects we are attacking.
Right.
And this includes, obviously, all these includes the maintenance cost and everything associated with our equipment and our technology. And the last part is we have a BMS. It's intelligent BMS. We call it as D-Joule. D-Joule means reducing joules. So in that we go ahead and audit a facility. We arrive at a baseline. See, you have this equipment and you're consuming your efficiency is this much kW per year, mostly for chiller aspects. So once we implement our automation systems, and we have an analytics team who works back in the back end to optimize the way chiller plants are operated, we will make an offer that we will save this much in your plant power consumption, or we'll improve this much in your chiller plant efficiency. And there will be a fixed payment or variable payment, depends on the terms that is agreed upon. So that is another place where client doesn't need to invest in anything. Everything will be done from our side. All these aspects are where the places where the client doesn't need to invest in anything.
Sure. Thanks, Kishore. Thanks. That's very interesting. We've heard from the various solution providers, but it'll be good to hear from the consumer side as well. Jatin, can we come over to you? Jatin, can you hear us?
Yes, yes.
Yes, hi.
Good afternoon.
So you heard from the three technology providers.
Yes.
I believe you have adopted some of these solutions recently.
Yes.
So it will be great to hear from you in terms of what was your experience and what is the end result or the outcome that you've been able to achieve through your own experience.
Yes. So we have started energy conservation from 2013-14 before smart joules came. So I have the two parts. One is the conventional part that we have done, and the other thing is technocraft that smart joule has done. So I have the two parts. So 2013-14 to 18-19, smart joules entered in Apollo Hospital, Ahmedabad from 2019. So before that, we have worked out some. So energy part for hospital is contribute electrical, fuel, and water. There is a three part, which is conservation. That is called the energy conservation. So we have done the operational, but we have changes around the 4,000 LED lights. We have put the VFD for different AHUs. So we have rectified the cooling towers. We have put the new cooling towers. So these are the basic operational. We have put the operation schedules for AHU cutoff. We have put some timers for that. There is some minority. So that is the operational parts. In 2013-14, we have the energy conservation consumption of yearly is 61 lakhs. So in 2018, it's come to 57 lakhs. before smart joule enters. So why I differentiate this part, because where smart joule has workout and where we work out. So it is also for all healthcare sector require why we enter in smart joule for healthcare sector. So at that time we have done the water conservation also. We recycle our RO water and we have reduced so many water consumption. And same is fuel. Earlier we have used diesel and we converted into PNG. So they definitely advantage for fuel conservation. So this is the part, and we have at that time in hospital there is a benchmark energy parameters. So at that time our power consumption per bed 100 kilowatt per bed. So in 2018 it's come down up to 19. But when smart joule enter, and at presently our power consumption per bed is around 70. So it is a rapidly changes. So
Okay, and did you do it? You're saying you did it in the Gujarat hospital, is it?
yes, for particular Ahmedabad Apollo Hospital, and it is 300 bedded hospital.
Okay, and have you rolled it out to other hospitals around the country?
Yes. So after that, this concept is adopted by our another Apollo units also.
Right.
So now I comes for smart joule, where smart joule center. So we come to ESCO. ESCO has just throw a one mail for this. This is different. So we choose smart joule among 6 contractor, and we started with work with smart joule. First they came here and they audited here. Before this going, I just throw you one another thing. We have the only hospital in Gujarat that has the ISO 51000. So this is also benefited for energy conservation.
Okay.
And when smart joule audited our hospital, and they started in early 2019. So they audited and they give us some of the modification and some of the changes. So we go through that model. We have took the baseline of 2018. That is our baseline, and we have contracted with them for 5 years. And they, after audited, they give us the 15% guaranteed saving per month. So now June started. First, they changed our chillers, because this hospital is 18 years old hospital. We have the HVAC system and another the old type hot chiller. So they put the smart chiller. That is the first change. And when we changed the chiller in August month, we have saved 1 lakh unit on that month compared to last year. So this is the first change. Another thing, they changed all the pumps and put the energy efficiency pump for chiller plant. Then after they changed all the pumps of water plant. Then they retrofit our cooling tower. So then after, because the HVAC system has the 60% of power consumption in healthcare sector. So major chunk is HVAC system, and we got it. So I appraised the smart joule. They have worked very hard and through it.
Okay. So tell me something. When you said you had 6 vendors initially submitting proposals to you, did you have problem in finding good, reputable, reliable vendors? I mean, I'm just trying to understand.
We have put the comparison. We have discussed all the vendors.
Okay.
And the smart joule has a benefit because they have the healthcare experience. So we want the vendor who have the healthcare experience. That is must.
Okay. All right.
So they understand our requirements. That is very good, and they've done it.
Okay. And if I can ask you, what was the major challenge through the execution process?
Yes. I come to that point. We have the old HVAC system. I just give the example. We have the 263 FCUs. So they have 3-way valves. So they want to convert into 2-way valve. There is a long exercise. And also we have the 63 AHUs. So this is the running hospital. But we have done it. We have changed the whole thing one by one. During winter, we have shut down the area and put it into proper way.
Understood.
So that is the challenge.
Okay.
Second one, I go through. When they enter our facility, I asked the Arjun, the smart zone person, "Okay, this is old facility, and that is my dream. I want to BMS for this area, and they have done it. This is the second challenge because BMS is a very long process. So wiring and put the extra equipment and all those things we have done during this COVID time. So that is a fantastic efforts for both sides.
Sure, sure. No, thanks, Jatin. Sunil, sorry, you've been waiting, listening patiently. Talk us through your own experience in terms of the solution that you have adopted and what does the end outcome look like?
My name is Sunil. I am from King's Health, Trivandrum, that's in Kerala. I joined this institution in 2018 September, that's 3 years back. So when I came here and I met my juniors, I spoke about this energy conservation. My junior told me, sir, we are already slim. And he showed me the bills of 2016, 17, 18. And all these years, this consumption didn't go up. It was slightly coming down. It's not a significant decrease, but it was coming down. And that's a happy moment. And I was happy that my team is very keen on this energy saving. So now you can imagine the point when I came here. And after 3 or 4 months, I came to know about the smart joules, and I called Arjun Gupta straight and I asked him to do an audit here. Smart joules didn't come to me because of mouth-to-mouth marketing, and I heard about smart joules, so I didn't have to approach any other method. I called him straight, and he's the person. He sent his team here for an audit, and they proposed their plan. So we went into agreement, and what happened is, I'll give the comparison. 3 years back, the baseline for August was 757,000 units. Now it stands at 606,000 units. So that's a 20% decrease from the base where my juniors already boasted this is already slim. So that's a great thing. They were able to do this. So my story is almost same like Jatin told, Mr. Jatin told. They did almost the same things here. So my pick is when I brought this proposal to my management asked one thing, Sunil, before going to invest in all this, because when they invest, they will take the lion's share of the savings part we will achieve. So what about we are giving you and your team this amount, and you do the investment here, and what about taking share out of it? Then I told my boss, sir, energy management or energy conservation is not a one-time thing. I may be able to, suppose I replace all the chillers and I put all these things and whatever this PLDC and whatever, I may be able to attain this energy saving maybe 10% or maybe 15%. But I am sure that I'll not be able to continue the saving over the period of time, because energy conservation is one thing which requires full-time attention. So we have our smart joules people here in-house, and some are sitting in Delhi. They are looking at our parameters around the clock, and they are doing the correction. And that's where the result is coming from. That's my story.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Sunil. That's very, very encouraging. So I want to come back to Siddharth and Rahul. There is so much potential out there. There's so much pressure from clients and their investors to reduce carbon emissions. Technology, I think you are saying, is there. What is required to accelerate the adoption curve? What are the key kind of pain points, market challenges? Is it consumer awareness? Is it, lack of financing or trained people, etc.? Or is it, so what is required to address this market demand? And do you need any favorable policy framework to support this?
I think as a concept, it's not very well known in the market is what I feel, and there's a reason to it. If you see around last decade, when you had a big flavor of ESCO or RESCO model, energy audit, and what we're trying to do right now, it very frankly put, it failed. 2000, 2010. But the big difference between that time and this time is digitization. So the biggest challenge that you have in energy efficiency project is how do you do the baselining? So
That's
right now with the digital infrastructure available, you can do a much more precise baselining, and it's not a one-time exercise. You can do this baselining month on month, quarter on quarter, where you can very clearly explain to the customer if there was an energy saving from the baseline, was it because generally their business or load went down, or was it because of your intervention as a technology or a solution provider? So I think that's one big challenge which we need to kind of overcome. Number two is many times these solutions are given as a retrofit to their existing infrastructure. So, for example, the infrastructure at Apollo versus KIMS might be of different vintage. They might also be of different OEMs and vendors, right? So when you make the intervention on that infrastructure, you have warranty guarantee issues. The term of the contract that you're trying to do, that also depends upon what is the actual life of the infrastructure that you're trying to optimize. For example. So that's a second big challenge that kind of comes on board. And the third, I would say is definitely with respect to a policy side on energy efficiency. I can be frank. Unlike say the kind of focus comes on the solar side or the wind side, right, where each and every bucket, technical, commercial, financial, regulatory, is touched by the policy element. That's not how the energy efficiency or demand side is being looked at holistically. But despite that, I mean, as you would see in the examples, you have stalwarts like Mr. Sunil and Jatin going ahead and doing something, way ahead of the market. But I will take the anecdote from what Siddharth said, that if you reduce an electricity unit, right, that's the cheapest form of energy saving, right? Yeah. And it's also the best way in which you reduce your emission, because what you do on the generation side is that you just are replacing brown electricity, from green electricity. But overall reduction itself or optimization, is quite important. So I think these elements, one is the education or people knowing about the business model. The second is about the baselining, the technical competence to do it repeatedly, which is mutually okay with the customer. And third is the life of the equipment, which you try to optimize, which is not owned by you or invested by you, makes this, that much more challenging. And hence, you not only need a good financing party or a developer. That won't work here, unlike a wind or a solar. The company basically needs to have a very strong technology DNA, that they are, an engineering, energy efficient technology company first and a developer or an investor later, not the other way around.
Mm-hmm. Very, very interesting, Rahul. What about Siddharth? Do you want to add to that? Anything?
Sure. No, Rahul said it right. Regarding policy, it's a double-edged sword. Sometimes you want policy, sometimes you don't want any policy, right? Absolutely. You just want the market to drive it.
Yeah.
I think this is one, while for obvious reasons, since you're connected to grids, you've got very different kind of regulatory stakeholders. There, the policy intervention is, I think, almost, it was necessary. Here, I'm of the maybe a slightly different opinion that most of my colleagues, that the market forces will attract this kind of change that needs to happen, right? Once the RE goals really get to a point where, okay, where do we go from here next? You've taken care of 100% of power, what to do next? You don't necessarily, will a scheme like PAT help? Absolutely. But I think that job is already done. That's the reason we have such esteemed people on this panel today, that everybody's talking about it. So there is a good recognition of this as an opportunity, as a problem area. Will a lot of policy intervention help or hurt? I think time will tell, right? Number one. Number two, I want to stress again that from a GHG emission footprint perspective, yes, non-power applications have a tremendously higher footprint than the power applications. But from a CFO's desk, the economical value of the intervention in power is far more attractive, if you will, than the non-power, because the value of heat is significantly lower than the value of power on a per unit basis, right? So I think there is this slight, I don't want to call it mismatch, it's a reality. And that is what has driven this non-power application to be a priority 2 or a priority 3. I mean, everybody would want to go for a lowest hanging fruit first, right? Sure. But the good news, I don't think that the silver lining is we've reached there now, or we are reaching there, where companies are coming forward and saying, okay, what next? I know a company, one of our customers, who has 90% converted one of their factories, pharmaceutical companies, into renewable electricity. But they're coming back to us and saying, okay, now what? We have the 60% sitting there, energy, which is all sorts of heating and cooling. How can you help us there? Yeah. So I think it's a good time to be in the space.
Sure. So, talking about policy, that's interesting. I mean, I agree with you. Sometimes lack of policy can be a good thing. And often in India, we joke that the sectors which do best are where there's no government policy, like the IT industry, for example. But policy can be, of course, framed in such a way that it can still spur on growth. And interestingly, yesterday we had Mr. Mitesh Sinha starting the conference, and he said that the government is thinking about re-engineering the REC scheme, the Renewable Energy Certificate scheme, to embed some kind of carbon element in that. So in the sense that consumers can basically earn certificates not just by switching to renewable power or renewable sources, but also by reducing their carbon emissions. So we don't know, but it will be some kind of that hybrid structure, or let's see what the government comes out with. But I presume something like this, or some kind of carbon trading or pricing mechanism in India would be quite helpful, I would think.
Absolutely. Look, more support mechanisms that are put in place to make the business work, the better it is. You're right. I did also hear what Mitesh had to say, and I think that was great. I think it's an arrow in the right direction. And why it will work is in front of us, because there are a lot of companies in India today, particularly the larger ones and MNCs, which have what is called an internal carbon pricing, right? So they would actually put $1 per ton. That number varies, by the way, from 8 to 15, onto any project evaluation that they would do. And so they would actually put that externality in it. And sometimes you'd be surprised. Externality is a cherry on top, and sometimes externality is critical to make a project work. So we've seen both ways. So things like what you mentioned, carbon credits, and a more vibrant carbon credit market would only, I think, help and advance this much quicker than it would otherwise.
Yeah. And what about the electrification of all this energy consumption? Is that something which is beginning to happen in India? I mean, what kind of opportunities are there in which sectors?
That's an interesting one. Vinay, if you look at any, I'd like to take a little bit more macro perspective on it, because it's a very, very nascent sector. It's hard to pinpoint opportunities specifically. But if you look at any developed economy versus a developing economy, one clear differentiator is electrification, right? And it's evident as our as our railways is going through this huge transformation of diesel to electric, right?
Yeah.
So electrification of any application, be it cooking. I mean, remember, if you go to the US and European places, it's all electric largely, right? You go to Japan, I mean, it'll be hard to find a chimney right there because everything is electrified. So I think electrification of X, be that X, be anything, is a very interesting indicator of the transition of a developing to a developed economy. India, where it is also going through that trend. And such very niche opportunities will emerge. They are emerging right now as we speak, especially as RE is becoming more prevalent in the grid. So both these two things have to happen simultaneously. It's the EV story. The last thing you want is EV being charged by coal-based power, right?
Yeah.
So similarly, the last thing you want is any application being served by thermal power. So you would want a trend in the market where RE is more easily accessible, cheaper, better, and all the other good things, so that it can start driving electrification of a whole lot of other things. And that's a trend I think most of us are watching very, very carefully. It's not as easy because there are some fundamental impediments. We've been hearing all day yesterday, banking charges, this charges, open access costs, cross subsidy, as there's enough problem on the RE accessibility front. But the good news is the fact that we're having those conversations, something will come out of it. So to summarize, yes, there will come a time where there will be a very large probability that every electron coming into your grid or into your door is green, is cheaper. When that day arrives, I think electrification of a whole host of non-electrified things will really begin to take off.
Yeah, makes sense. So Rahul, just going back to even what Kishore was saying and what clearly the experience of KIMS Hospital in Apollo shows, I mean, I think healthcare seems to be in some kind of a elite when it comes to adoption of energy efficiency or other such measures. What are the other key sectors where you see immediate opportunities or sectors which are already onto it in terms of adoption of renewable heating solutions or cooling solutions?
So when first, if I come from an energy efficiency, standpoint, definitely, I would very simply say closed buildings, closed factories, which have a controlled environment. Okay. So you can look at a factory, you can look at a pharmaceutical company or a grade A, food manufacturing, FMCG company, ice cream, dairy, right? Nutraceuticals, those kind of sectors where you need a controlled environment. And the number, as Mr. Jatin had said, almost 40 to 60% of their power consumption is actually HVAC, air handling unit, the pumps, the chiller, the cooling system, which keeps the environment, the moisture, humidity, cleanliness, etc. of the air intact. So I think that is the number one sector that we should be looking at, from an energy efficiency, standpoint. Similarly, on the thermal side, what we're looking at, sectors where you have a lot of hot water and steam application. So it can be, again, a leather, FMCG, dairy, breweries, many of the, certain processes in auto sector, like the paint shop, right? Where you need, heat as a source of, energy. So these are the sectors that, we are right now targeting on. And then, you'd realize that, say, for example, one case study I'll give you. One of the, world's largest food and FMCG kind of a company, where the proposition now we are taking is that, say, you are consuming around 10 million units of electricity a month. So massive factory, you can just imagine the scale of it. And now, in one go, we can look at a 5 megawatt of rooftop solar plant. We can look at 10 to 12 ton per hour kind of biomass or a multiple fuel fired boiler, which will give you the thermal energy. And if the size of this boiler goes up slightly, you can even convert it into a cogen. That is, you can also produce electricity, from this particular source. And simultaneously, your entire HVAC and cooling system will get optimized by using the state-of-the-art firmware, which is on the edge computing side, so that you also have data privacy and those kind of issues, so that you are able to maintain. So it's this multi-pronged approach with which many of the MNCs, like say the Amazons, Facebook, Nestle, and Danones of the world, who have said that by 2030, 2035, they want to go completely renewable. That's how they would go about doing it. But while they're doing it, just one more anecdote I'll put, Vinay. My estimate is that the marginal abatement curve, right? 60, 70%, 80% of your decarbonization will happen in a cost-efficient way. But post that, you might have to spend more to actually, go completely zero. Right? So that's one thing where we need much more breakthrough. But I think that is required, and that's where regulations should focus on, to allow companies to do that. Put them over there. That's number one. And number two, what I would say is that more and more decentralized energy systems that are getting created it will have the same kind of revolution what, say, a cell phones brought in the telecom sector, when the market gravitated from a landline to a decentralized, kind of a system, because a lot of onus on the cost, on the performance of the equipment, on the efficiency of the equipment now is in the hands, of the prosumer, right? And that puts a lot of power and onus in their hands. And I see that, that is the trend which is going to be there in the next 10, 20 years, because just depending on the oil and gas power sector companies like Gencos, Discos, etc., is not going to solve this problem of helping the whole economy transition to a low carbon stage.
Yeah. Thanks, Rahul. Unfortunately, I think this is a session I would love to carry on because I'm learning so much. But we have come at the time toward the end of the session, so I would like to wrap things up. Thank you very much, Siddharth Malik, Rahul Dasari, Jatin, Kishore, and Sunil Kumar for your very valuable time. I hope our listeners found it very interesting and insightful. I think the key takeaways for me are that one, I'm really astounded that the entire energy consumption needs of the corporate world are actually 3 to 4 times of the power consumption itself. So something like 200 gigawatts. And that basically shows, sorry, Siddharth, yes.
I'm going to rudely interrupt you. Actually, while we were speaking, I looked up the number from one of the reports that UNIDO did.
Yeah.
The number is 294 gigawatt thermal, not even 200. So just a minor correction. So it's significantly higher than what we thought. That's 1243 terawatt hours. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. Even more, even higher. And that just shows what the potential is in this space. I think, we are in very early stages of, turning green. Renewable power is well understood. But the next step, in my view, has to be more energy efficiency, more sustainable heating and cooling solutions. And I think it's fascinating to hear about these technologies like solar thermal, concentrated solar thermal, electrification of various sectors, thermal energy storage, Siddharth talked about, etc. At the government side, I agree that, there may not be much of a role for government, but I still think the government can play a very, very valuable facilitating role. I think a carbon pricing or trading mechanism would go a long way. I know there are always challenges when it comes to government policy, challenges in terms of consistency, predictability, timelines, etc. But I think if the government can take some facilitating mechanisms on carbon trading and on consumer awareness and education, I think those would go, a very, very long way. So with that, we wrap up the session here. Thank you very much again for listening to us. I'll pass over to my colleague, Ankita.
Thank you, Vinay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, panelists, for giving us a session packed with information and insights. We will reconvene for the next session after a short networking break. In this break, you can also visit booths of our sponsors, Longi, Tata, Jinko, and Radiance to know more about their products and offerings.